What if every spy thriller you watched, every war movie you cheered for, every patriotic hero you admired, was carefully designed by shadowy government operatives? For decades, while Americans sat in darkened theaters eating popcorn, the Central Intelligence Agency was writing the script of their reality. From the glamorous studios of Hollywood to the classified bunkers of Langley, a secret alliance was forging the most powerful propaganda machine in history. They didn't just want to entertain you. They wanted to control how you thought about America, about enemies, about freedom itself. This is the story of how your favorite movies became weapons, and how the CIA turned Hollywood into its most effective battlefield. The truth has been hidden in plain sight. Until now. August 1945. World War II ends with mushroom clouds over Japan, and America stands as the world's greatest military power. But within months, a new anxiety creeps across the nation. The Soviet Union, once an ally, becomes an existential threat. Winston Churchill declares an Iron Curtain has descended across Europe. The Cold War begins, and with it, a terrifying realization. This war wouldn't be won with bombs alone. September 1947. President Truman signs the National Security Act, creating the Central Intelligence Agency. From its first days, the CIA understood something revolutionary. The battle for global supremacy would be fought not just in the shadows of espionage, but in the bright lights of culture itself. The agency faced a unique challenge. Traditional propaganda was too obvious, too easily dismissed. Soviet films with their heavy-handed messaging were mocked in the West. The CIA needed something subtler, more insidious, more effective. They needed to make people want to believe. And they realized they already had the perfect weapon. Hollywood was the most powerful cultural force on Earth. American films played in theaters from Paris to Tokyo, from Cairo to Buenos Aires. They shaped how the world saw America and how Americans saw themselves. More importantly, they did something no government propaganda could ever achieve. They made people lower their defenses. Entertainment slipped past the critical mind, bypassing skepticism, planting ideas directly into the emotional core. The studios themselves were vulnerable to this approach. Many executives remembered the isolationist sentiment before Pearl Harbor, the America First movement that had opposed intervention. They'd seen how wrong public opinion could be. When the CIA came calling, wrapped in the flag and speaking of patriotic duty, many were receptive. The first meetings were informal. Dinner parties in Beverly Hills. Quiet conversations at the Brown Derby. CIA officers, many from elite backgrounds similar to studio executives, spoke casually about the communist threat. They shared classified intelligence. They made studio chiefs feel like insiders, part of the team protecting America. What began as patriotic cooperation would become something far more systematic, far more troubling. In the early 1950s, the CIA launched one of its most ambitious domestic operations. Its codename was Operation Mockingbird, and its goal was breathtaking in scope: infiltrate and influence American media at every level. The architect was Frank Wisner, head of the CIA's Office of Policy Coordination. Wisner was a true believer in psychological warfare, convinced that controlling information was as important as any military operation. He called his creation the mighty Wurlitzer. Like the enormous theater organs that could mimic any instrument, he wanted to play the American media, creating whatever symphony the moment required. Wisner's operation was stunningly successful. Within a few years, the CIA had relationships with journalists at every major newspaper. Reporters became assets, their stories reviewed or even written by intelligence officers. Editors killed stories that might damage agency operations. Publishers opened their organizations to CIA influence. But Wisner's vision extended beyond newspapers. He understood that entertainment shaped opinion even more powerfully than news. People could dismiss a newspaper editorial, but a movie made you feel. A movie made you identify with heroes and despise villains. A movie created a reality that felt more real than reality itself. The CIA began recruiting entertainment industry figures with the same systematic approach they used for journalists. Some were ideological, genuine anti-communists eager to fight the Red Menace. Some were mercenary, happy to accept CIA funding or favors. Some never even knew they were being used, their patriotic cooperation exploited without their full understanding. By 1953, the network was operational. The CIA had established contacts in every major studio. They had relationships with producers, directors, screenwriters. Most importantly, they had something Hollywood desperately wanted: access. The agency could provide technical advisors, classified information, exciting stories based on real operations. They could arrange military cooperation for films, provide equipment, locations, expertise. All they asked in return was a small favor: let us review the script. Let us suggest some changes. Let us make sure America is portrayed correctly. Who could object to that? 1954. A charming animated film appears in theaters, Animal Farm, based on George Orwell's allegorical novel about totalitarianism. Critics praise its artistry. Audiences enjoy the tale of farm animals overthrowing their human oppressor, only to be enslaved by pigs who become more tyrannical than the humans ever were. What audiences don't know is that the CIA secretly funded the entire production. Orwell's novel ended ambiguously, with the pigs becoming indistinguishable from the humans, a critique of both Soviet communism and Western capitalism. The CIA's film version changed the ending. Now the other animals rise up again, specifically rebelling against the pigs. The message was clear: communism was the unique evil. Western capitalism remained unblemished. It was a template for what would follow. The CIA established an entertainment liaison office, though it operated under different names at different times. Their job was simple: monitor Hollywood production, identify films featuring intelligence work or Cold War themes, and consult on scripts. The consultations were rarely refused. After all, the agency represented authenticity. They were the real spies. Who better to ensure a film got the details right? But the details they cared about weren't technical, they were ideological. Scripts were modified to make American agents more heroic, their missions more justified. Enemy spies became more villainous, their motivations more purely evil. Any moral ambiguity was smoothed away. Any critique of American intelligence operations was softened or eliminated entirely. In 1958, The Quiet American reached theaters, based on Graham Greene's novel about American involvement in Vietnam. Greene's book was deeply critical, portraying the American character as naive and destructive, contributing to violence while claiming noble intentions. The film changed everything. Now the American was heroic, trying to prevent violence. The critical edge was dulled beyond recognition. Greene was furious. But what could he do? He'd sold the rights. The CIA was also creating archetypes, templates that would dominate entertainment for decades. The heroic American agent. Brave, principled, fighting for freedom against tyranny. He might bend the rules, but his heart was pure. He represented American values: individualism, courage, moral clarity. This wasn't just about individual films. The agency was shaping an entire mythology, creating a shared cultural understanding of what intelligence work meant, what America represented, what the Cold War was about. And this was only the beginning. By the late 1950s, the CIA Hollywood pipeline was fully operational and expanding rapidly. What had begun as isolated collaborations was becoming standard practice. The question was no longer whether the agency would influence films about intelligence or the Cold War. The question was how many and how deeply. The 1950s and 60s saw an explosion of Cold War cinema. Spy thrillers, war films, science fiction allegories, entire genres were shaped by the ideological battlefield between East and West. And behind many of these films, visible only in declassified documents released decades later, was the CIA. The McCarthy era created a perfect storm for this influence. Hollywood was already terrified of being labeled communist. The House Un-American Activities Committee had destroyed careers, blacklisted writers, shattered lives. Studios were desperate to prove their patriotism, their loyalty, their Americanism. When the CIA offered to help them demonstrate that loyalty, how could they refuse? The spy thriller genre exploded with the James Bond films beginning in 1962. While Bond was British, his American counterparts soon followed, suave, sophisticated agents fighting communist villains bent on world domination. These films made intelligence work glamorous, exciting, unambiguously righteous. The enemy was never complex. Soviet agents were cruel, robotic, sometimes barely human. They served an evil empire bent on destroying freedom itself. There was never any question about who the heroes were, never any doubt about the justice of the cause. War films followed similar patterns. Movies about Korea presented American intervention as necessary and noble. Early Vietnam films portrayed American soldiers as defenders of freedom against communist aggression. The geopolitical complexity, the colonial history, the legitimate grievances of independence movements, all of this disappeared into simple good versus evil narratives. Even science fiction became an ideological weapon. Invasion of the Body Snatchers in 1956 created a perfect metaphor for Cold War anxiety. Emotionless aliens replacing humans with identical copies who looked the same but had lost their humanity. The film could be read multiple ways, but in Cold War America, the subtext was clear. Communism turned people into conformist drones, stripping away individuality and freedom. These weren't isolated films. This was a genre machine, producing dozens, then hundreds of productions, all reinforcing the same basic worldview. And while not every film was directly influenced by the CIA, the agency's fingerprints were on enough key productions to shape the entire landscape. The cumulative effect was staggering. Multiple generations of Americans grew up watching these films, absorbing these narratives, internalizing these assumptions about America, about communism, about the world. But the full scope of CIA manipulation becomes clear only when we examine specific cases. Films where declassified documents and whistleblower testimony reveal exactly how the agency operated. We've already mentioned this 1958 film, but the story deserves deeper examination. Graham Greene's novel, published in 1955, was one of the first works to seriously question American involvement in Vietnam. The American character, Pyle, is convinced he's helping, supporting a third force between communism and colonialism. But his actions contribute to a bombing that kills innocent civilians. Greene's message was clear: good intentions weren't enough. American intervention was causing harm. The CIA couldn't allow this narrative to spread. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz later admitted to being visited by CIA operative Edward Lansdale, the real-life inspiration for Pyle. Lansdale pressured Mankiewicz to change the ending. In the film version, Pyle is vindicated. He was trying to prevent the bombing, not cause it. The Vietnamese character who murders him is revealed to be wrong, misguided, perhaps even manipulated by communists. The film completely inverted Greene's message. What had been a warning against American hubris became a justification for American intervention. When the novel was later adapted again in 2002, after the Vietnam War had ended and the truth was undeniable, the filmmakers restored Greene's original intent. But in 1958, at a crucial moment when American involvement in Vietnam was escalating, the CIA had successfully corrupted a major literary work to serve their narrative. This 1962 thriller presents a fascinating paradox. The film depicts an American soldier brainwashed by communists, programmed to assassinate a presidential candidate. It's paranoid, disturbing, and initially the intelligence community opposed it. They worried it might make Americans too afraid, might even give communists ideas. But then something interesting happened. The agency realized the film was actually useful. It established the idea that communists had sophisticated mind control technology, that they were engaged in psychological warfare of terrifying sophistication. This justified increased CIA research into similar programs, research that was actually happening through MKUltra and other projects. The film created cultural cover for the CIA's own controversial activities. When stories about American mind control experiments began to leak, they seemed less shocking because Americans had already absorbed the narrative that this was something everyone was doing and we had to keep up. Jump forward to 1986. Top Gun seems like pure entertainment. Tom Cruise flying fighter jets, a soundtrack that defined an era, a simple story about competition and redemption. It was also one of the most effective recruitment tools the US military ever produced. The film required extensive military cooperation, access to aircraft carriers, Real fighter jets, technical advisors. In exchange, the Pentagon and intelligence community had script approval. The result was a film that glamorized military life, made fighter pilots look like rock stars, and stripped away any complexity about what military power meant. Navy recruitment increased by 500% after the film's release. A generation of young Americans signed up inspired by what they'd seen on screen, never realizing they'd been watching a carefully crafted recruitment video disguised as a summer blockbuster. Top Gun established a template that continues today. The military provides equipment and access. Filmmakers provide flattering portrayals. It's a mutually beneficial relationship that has produced dozens of films, each one shaping how Americans understand military power. In 1988, Rambo 3 was released, dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan. The film portrays these fighters as freedom warriors, heroically resisting Soviet occupation. Sylvester Stallone's character joins them, helping them fight the communist invaders. What audiences didn't know was that the CIA was doing exactly the same thing in reality, funding, training, and arming these same Mujahideen fighters through Operation Cyclone, one of the most expensive covert operations in agency history. The film was part of a broader information campaign to build American support for this operation. It romanticized the fighters, simplified the conflict, and made American involvement seem obviously justified. The tragic irony became clear years later. Many of these freedom fighters became the Taliban. Some of the weapons the CIA provided ended up used against American soldiers in Afghanistan after 2001. Osama bin Laden himself was part of the movement the CIA supported and Hollywood glamorized. Rambo 3 stands as a perfect example of how entertainment and covert operations intertwined, how films could build support for policies that would have devastating long-term consequences. These case studies reveal something crucial. The CIA wasn't just opportunistically influencing random films. They understood psychology, understood narrative, understood how stories bypass rational thinking and plant ideas directly into emotional consciousness. Internal CIA documents from the era show sophisticated understanding of how entertainment propaganda works. Traditional propaganda triggers defenses. People know they're being persuaded, so they resist. But entertainment is different. People watch movies to feel, to escape, to be transported. Their critical faculties are suspended. They're emotionally open, receptive, vulnerable. The agency studied how narrative structure shapes perception. Heroes and villains aren't just characters, they're psychological anchors. When you identify with a hero, you adopt their perspective, their moral framework. When you hate a villain, you absorb the ideology that makes them villainous. Music amplifies emotional manipulation. A swelling orchestral score during a speech about freedom makes that freedom feel more important, more sacred. Ominous music when Soviet characters appear trains emotional associations. These people are threatening, dangerous, wrong. Visual language matters too. American characters are lit warmly, shot at flattering angles. Enemy characters are lit coldly, shot from below or in harsh shadows. These subtle cues operate below conscious awareness, shaping instinctive reactions. The CIA's internal studies showed that entertainment was more effective than news at shifting attitudes. News could be dismissed, that's just propaganda. But a powerful film stayed with you. It shaped your emotional landscape, influenced how you interpreted later information, colored your worldview in ways you might never consciously recognize. This was the perfect crime. The audience never suspected they were being manipulated. They thought they were just watching a movie. By the 1980s and 90s, the relationship between intelligence agencies and entertainment had become so normalized that it was barely hidden anymore. The CIA established official liaison offices. The Pentagon created entire departments devoted to Hollywood relations. What had been covert had become standard operating procedure. December 1991. The Soviet Union dissolves. The Cold War ends. Surely now the CIA-Hollywood relationship would end too, right? Wrong. The infrastructure remained. The relationships remained. Only the enemies changed. Soviet villains were seamlessly replaced by terrorists, drug lords, rogue states. The techniques remained identical: simplify complex geopolitical situations, create clear heroes and villains, justify American intervention, glorify intelligence and military operations. Films about terrorism in the 90s and 2000s followed the exact same patterns as Cold War spy thrillers. Muslim terrorists replaced Soviet agents as the faceless, inhuman threat. American agents remained noble warriors defending freedom. The moral complexity of Middle Eastern politics, the history of American intervention in the region, the legitimate grievances that fed anti-American sentiment, all of this disappeared into simple good versus evil narratives. The liaison offices continued their work. The Entertainment Liaison Office, now operating more openly, maintained regular contact with studios and production companies. Their message remained consistent: we can help you make your film authentic, we can provide access and information, we just want to make sure America is portrayed accurately. Accurately still meant heroically. The collaboration around Zero Dark 30 in 2012 shows how little had changed. The film depicts the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and director Catherine Bigelow received unprecedented CIA access. Agency officials gave her information about the operation, provided details, helped shape the narrative. The resulting controversy revealed the problems with this relationship. The film portrayed torture as effective in obtaining crucial information, a claim that CIA officials themselves had disputed, that investigations had shown was false. But the film presented it as fact, and millions of viewers absorbed that narrative. Did the CIA deliberately use the film to rehabilitate the image of torture? The evidence suggests yes. Did Bigelow realize she was being manipulated? Perhaps not. But the result was clear. A film that should have been critical became an apology for war crimes. Marvel's superhero films represent modern military intelligence propaganda in its purest form. These films regularly receive Pentagon and intelligence community support. In exchange, they portray American military power as heroic, necessary, benevolent. They create a fantasy of American exceptionalism where the U.S. military protects the world from threats. The political implications are stripped away. Nobody asks why these threats exist, whether American policy contributed to their creation, whether military solutions are truly optimal. The films present military power as inherently good, its use as automatically justified. And it works. Surveys show military approval ratings increasing after major superhero film releases. A new generation absorbs the same messages their grandparents did during the Cold War, just with different costumes and special effects. What was covert has become overt. What was scandalous has become normal. The CIA-Hollywood relationship, once hidden, is now openly acknowledged as standard practice. But something else happened over the decades. The truth began to emerge. The Freedom of Information Act, passed in 1966 and strengthened in the 70s, allowed researchers and journalists to request classified documents. Slowly, painfully, the archives began opening. Documents marked secret and confidential were declassified, revealing the extent of CIA involvement in entertainment. Journalists like Carl Bernstein published exposés in the 1970s about Operation Mockingbird and CIA media infiltration. Academic researchers like Francis Stoner Saunders documented the cultural Cold War in meticulous detail. Whistleblowers from inside the intelligence community confirmed what documents suggested. By the 2000s, the basic facts were undeniable. The CIA had systematically infiltrated Hollywood, had influenced dozens of major productions, had used entertainment as a weapon in the Cold War and beyond. This wasn't conspiracy theory, it was documented historical fact. And some filmmakers began pushing back. George Clooney's Good Night and Good Luck, in 2005 depicted Edward R. Murrow's confrontation with McCarthyism, implicitly criticizing the era that gave the CIA such power over entertainment. Vice, in 2018 offered a scathing portrait of Dick Cheney and the intelligence failures leading to the Iraq War. Independent films and documentaries increasingly challenged official narratives. These films rarely received CIA cooperation. They didn't get military equipment or technical advisors. They had to work harder, with smaller budgets, fighting for distribution and promotion. But they existed, offering alternative narratives, questioning official stories, encouraging critical thinking. Public awareness has grown too. More Americans understand that military and intelligence cooperation with films comes with strings attached. They're learning to ask questions. Who funded this? Who had script approval? What perspective is being promoted? Who benefits from this narrative? The manipulation still happens, but it's becoming less effective as more people understand how it works. So what does all this mean for you sitting here learning this history? It means that entertainment you've consumed throughout your life wasn't politically neutral. It was shaped, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically, by intelligence agencies pursuing specific agendas. The heroes you admired, the enemies you feared, the worldview you absorbed. Much of it was engineered. This isn't about dismissing every film as propaganda. Many filmmakers genuinely try to tell honest stories. Many films have no intelligence community involvement at all. But the pervasive influence over decades has shaped the entire landscape of entertainment, creating assumptions and expectations that affect even independent productions. So how do you watch critically? Start by asking questions. Who funded this production? Follow the money. If military or intelligence agencies provided significant support, what did they get in return? Who are the heroes and villains? Are they simplified or complex? Does the hero represent a particular political perspective? Is the villain humanized or just a caricature? What perspective is centered? Whose story is told? Whose is ignored? Who is portrayed as having legitimate grievances, and who is dismissed? What is the film asking you to feel? When does the music swell? What emotional associations are being created? Are you being manipulated toward a particular emotional response? What complexity is missing? Real-world conflicts involve history, multiple perspectives, genuine grievances on all sides. If everything seems simple and obvious, be suspicious. These questions won't ruin your enjoyment of films. They'll deepen it. You'll start noticing craft, technique, the artistry of how stories are constructed and why. You'll become an active participant in creating meaning rather than a passive receiver of narratives. And this matters beyond entertainment. The same techniques used in films are used in news coverage, political messaging, social media. Learning to think critically about movies trains you to think critically about everything. Democracy requires informed citizens. But information doesn't just mean facts. It means understanding how narratives shape perception, how emotion influences judgment, how stories create the frameworks through which we interpret facts. The CIA understood this 70 years ago. They realized that whoever controls the stories controls the culture, and whoever controls the culture shapes reality itself. But here's what they didn't fully anticipate. Awareness is the antidote to manipulation. Once you understand how the magic trick works, once you can see the strings being pulled, the manipulation loses its power. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't watch the same way again. And that's not a loss, it's liberation. For 70 years, the line between entertainment and propaganda blurred until it disappeared entirely. The Central Intelligence Agency, working with the Pentagon and other government agencies, systematically influenced how Americans understood the world through the films they watched. They shaped spy thrillers to glamorize intelligence work. They influenced war films to justify military intervention. They even touched science fiction and animation, using every genre as a potential weapon in ideological warfare. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. This was documented policy, revealed in declassified documents, confirmed by insiders, traced through specific films that shaped generations of viewers. The goals were sometimes defensive, countering Soviet propaganda, maintaining morale during difficult times. But often they were more troubling, building support for covert operations, justifying questionable policies, manipulating public opinion to enable actions that might not have survived democratic scrutiny. The effects ripple through our culture still. The assumptions we make about intelligence work, about American military power, about who the good guys are, these assumptions didn't form in a vacuum. They were deliberately cultivated through decades of sophisticated psychological operations disguised as entertainment. But the story doesn't end with manipulation. It ends with you, with awareness, with choice. Now you know that films can be weapons. You know that entertainment can serve political agendas. You know that even beloved classics might have been shaped by invisible hands with specific goals. This knowledge is power. It transforms you from passive audience to active critic. It gives you tools to analyze not just films but any narrative being presented to you. It makes you harder to manipulate, harder to deceive, harder to control. The CIA's cultural warfare operations assumed audiences would remain unaware, that the manipulation would stay invisible. They were probably right for decades. But truth has a way of surfacing. Archives open. Whistleblowers speak. Researchers document. Journalists investigate. And now you're part of that truth. You're part of the resistance against manipulation, simply by being aware, by thinking critically, by refusing to accept narratives without questioning their source and purpose. The screen is still there. Hollywood still makes films. The military and intelligence agencies still offer cooperation. The relationship continues. But now you can see behind the curtain. You can recognize the patterns. You can ask the questions that reveal the agenda. In a democracy, this is essential. Citizens can't make informed decisions if their understanding of reality has been secretly shaped by powerful interests. Free thought requires honest information. And honest information requires critical viewers who refuse to be passive consumers of whatever narrative is being sold. So the next time you watch a war film, a spy thriller, a superhero spectacular, enjoy it. Entertainment is one of humanity's great pleasures. But watch with eyes open. Ask questions. Think critically. Recognize when you're being sold a worldview along with the action and drama. Because the most important freedom isn't freedom from propaganda. That's impossible in any society. The most important freedom is freedom of thought, the ability to recognize propaganda when you see it and choose whether to accept it. The CIA spent 70 years trying to control that freedom. They shaped films, influenced narratives, manipulated emotions, all to create a population that thought the right thoughts, believed the right stories, supported the right policies. But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed audiences would never figure it out. You just did. The question now isn't whether films will be used to shape opinion. That battle was lost decades ago if it was ever really up for debate. The question is whether you'll be a conscious participant in that process. Aware of what's happening, critical of what you're shown, active in creating your own understanding rather than accepting someone else's. The truth was hidden in plain sight for 70 years, projected on screens across America and the world. Now it's declassified. Now it's clear. Now you know. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. But at least now you know the screen has two sides. You've been sitting on one side your whole life, watching the light and shadow, absorbing the stories, feeling the emotions. Now you can see the other side too. You can see the projector, the operators, the hands that chose which film to run and why. And once you see both sides, you're never just an audience again. You're awake.